promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
People will return to the people, and so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men, with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You are men.
Welcome to the Rock World Live Show here on WSHO Sunshine 800 AM. I am your humble host, Trey Roberts, sitting in with you on this Saturday morning, as I do on most Saturday mornings. Glad you joined us and hoping you'll stay with us all throughout the hour. Got a great program for you. Maybe, maybe not. Don't know. You know, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. I get it. Thank you for joining us, though. Look, if you want to be a part of the program, you can give us a call, 504-527-0800. You can also go to WSHO.com, and if you slide on down the page, you can see that there's a chat room there. Richard D. is already here in the room. Looks like he's a hangover from the other night, from last night, rather. So lots of space available for you. 5 spots. Looks like available for you. 6 spots available for you right now. So jump in there and just be nice. I mean that is like literally. Okay, so I want to recommend a podcast for you. Megyn Kelly, who pretty much everybody knows who Megyn Kelly is. Megyn Kelly this week had Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler. If you don't know who Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler are, I guess that's good, because you may not actually be watching much news, which that's pretty good. But you might know them as the IRS whistleblowers who testified this week before Congress about the Hunter Biden investigation. One of the men is a registered Republican. The other man is a registered Democrat. Both of them have come out as whistleblowers. They were investigating. One is the direct investigator, and the other is the supervisor. And they basically are trying to blow the whistle on the procedures. So for them, this is not specifically about Hunter Biden as much as it is trying to restore the confidence that Americans should have in the Internal Revenue Service. Now that, I'm not trying to make a joke about that, because when I say confidence in the Internal Revenue Service, I don't think anybody has confidence in the IRS. I don't think anybody likes the IRS. And I think pretty much everyone believes that the IRS is often weaponized against their political opponents, depending upon who is in the White House. Let me give you case in point. During the Obama administration, on the run-up to his re-election bid, this is when Mitt Romney was running against him. Right around the time of Benghazi, that was running up to the election, the Lois Lerner was the head of the IRS, and there were congressional hearings that were held, and the IRS was being forced by the Obama administration and the Eric Holder DOJ to target Tea Party, liberty groups, and Christian and Jewish non-for-profit 501c3 applications. There were many Tea Party members, leaders, and organizers that were being audited or whose 501c3 status was being delayed during this time. And it came out during these congressional hearings that the Obama administration, under Lois Lerner, was intentionally targeting these groups. And by doing that, it was forcing common, everyday American citizens to have to spend a tremendous amount of money to either get legal defense against the accusations made by the IRS or be denied their 501c3 status as a non-for-profit, or ultimately take their organization that they were trying to get special tax considerations for and basically close their doors. So this was definitely intentional harassment, intentional intimidation, but this again was the weaponization of the federal bureaucracy against normal American citizens. So everybody should remember that. Then if you remember, right when Trump was elected, pretty much everything that came out shortly after the elections, that he was in fact being spied on, that he was in fact being targeted. We know it now that it's called Operation Hurricane, Firestorm Hurricane or something like that, I forget, but it's got some kind of weather name to it. You probably remember. If you jump in the chat room, put it in there, and we'll give you credit for it. This was the FBI and the DOJ doing all kind of corrupt investigating into the Trump White House. And this was the idea that was floated by the Clinton campaign, and specifically then former Vice President Joe Biden. So he's the one who suggested how to target, for instance, not General Petraeus, the other general that ultimately was going from the Obama administration into the Trump administration, and he basically he actually runs around. I'm forgetting his name as well, but you have a multi-starred general who gets targeted because he had conversations with Russian dignitaries, as his position often requires. But then the FBI came in and basically entrapped him by, hey, we just want to have a conversation with you. Well, is this on the record? No. Hey, have you talked to the Russians? No, I have not. And then they came back and said that he lied to the FBI, he lied to investigators, therefore he prevented justice from taking place, and that those charges were brought up against him, and he fought it and said, hey, this wasn't an official interview on the part of the FBI. If that would have been the case, I would have had my lawyer, we would have pled the fifth, or we would have invoked some of our constitutional rights, or we would have answered differently, but you said it was just a conversation, therefore I didn't feel compelled under the law to be completely forthright with you. But they used it against him. So all of this stuff, and then of course the Mueller and impeachment, and I mean all of these things that targeted the White House, which was a weaponization. This is a common thing. It's a weaponization of the intelligence agencies against President Trump and his entire administration. During the Mueller investigation, all of the people who ultimately were either indicted or who were charged, arrested, and convicted of crimes as a result of the Mueller investigation, None of it had anything to do with Russia collusion. They were all process crimes. While investigating Russia collusion, which was not a thing, and they knew it from the beginning, because the Steele dossier was not real, they find out that, Roger Stone hasn't paid some taxes, so they get him on tax stuff. Oh, Roger Stone lied, so we're going to get him on, lying to a federal investigation. Oh, this guy was getting money from Ukraine while he was running the president of Ukraine's campaign, and he didn't declare that income when he came back to the United States. Therefore, he didn't pay taxes on it. So, boom, tax evasion. We got him, Paul Manafort, and it was just process crimes, and none of it had anything to do with Russia collusion. But really, the attack of the what do you call it? The intelligence apparatus of the federal government and the weaponizing of it against President Trump was really interpreted by most of us as an attack on the American people and the will of the American people, because we had duly elected President Trump and not Hillary Clinton, who she just thought it was an absolute given. If you remember, James Comey came out and said, yes, Hillary Clinton did things that were absolutely illegal when she had an illegal server in the bathroom of her apartment, and she was using devices that were not encrypted, so she was trafficking in completely high-level confidential information, and she was doing it in unsecured manners. So he says she absolutely broke the law. But because he thought she was going to win the election and become the next president of the United States, he went out a couple of weeks before the election and put it out there that, yes, we've been investigating her. Yes, this is what we found. Yes, she has broken several laws. But no, we're not going to recommend to the DOJ to prosecute her. Comey then went on to say that the reason that he did that was because they didn't think that there was a chance that President Trump could get elected. Therefore, he wanted to take away the sting of the Republican Congress trying to come in and claim that she was illegitimate and then target her for impeachment right out the gate. So he wanted to say, we already know it, we've already investigated it, here's what we concluded, but we're not prosecuting it criminally. Well, that backfired. And so time and time and time again, what we see is what's good for them, but not good for us. If Donald Trump Jr. had a laptop filled with videos of him doing coke and other drugs and smoking crack with prostitutes, butt naked, and all kinds of emails and text messages and me chats and all these other things from foreign countries, and him using his father's presidency to extort money to the tune of $17 to $20 million, according to these IRS whistleblowers who have seen Hunter Biden's tax documents and the proof necessary to prove that these incomes that he's declaring and the things that he did with the money that he's declaring that they're legal. And what they concluded was, going all the way back to 2014, is that they and the prosecutor in the DOJ agreed that they were going to charge him with a felony, because when you have misdemeanors and felonies, the law requires you to charge with the felony because the felony is the greater charge. And what is it that Hunter Biden is going next week into court to be to be sentenced on? Misdemeanors. Because they slow walked the entire investigation to where the 2014, 15, and 16 allegations, the statute of limitations have run their course in Washington, D.C. and in California. So the only ones that they're getting him on are the laws that he broke in Delaware and not the other ones, which means we're never going to find out what Burisma gave him $5 million for, what these Chinese firms gave him and the big guy. And so go listen, if you would, go listen this week to the Megyn Kelly podcast with IRS whistleblowers. She spends almost 2 hours with both of them, and they explain that this is bigger than Hunter Biden. Although for you and I, this is important because Hunter is just emblematic of the Biden corruption. And what most of us have known for a very long time, that where there's Biden corruption, there's been Obama corrupt, like this revisionist history that somehow or another, that all of the politics in America went down into the toilet during the Trump years because of Trump derangement system. You haven't been paying attention. This stuff goes back to the Obama years. BLM goes back to the Obama years. It's Obama that learned critical race theory from the Harvard professor that came up with it. It's Obama. If you remember, we forget that it was during the Obama years where he said, we are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. It was Michelle Obama who said that Barack knows he's going to have to change our history. He's going to have to change our traditions. Because remember, he ran on hope and change. It was Obama who did the beer summit with the Harvard professor and the Boston police officer who acted stupidly. It was Trayvon Martin that he said, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon. It was Freddie Gray in Baltimore. It was Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot, in Ferguson. It was Eric Gardner in New York, I can't breathe. That he leaned into all of these stories, and every single one of them, if you're saying you can't breathe, you can breathe. We find out that Trayvon Martin wasn't some little cute 16-year-old kid. He was an 18, 19-year-old grown man, high, and jacked up out of his mind, thinking that he was just going to run roughshod over this dopey-looking white Hispanic dude. Little did he know, the guy had a gun on him and got his life snuffed out. The whole hands up, don't shoot was a lie. Michael Brown, the gentle giant, had just strong-armed robbery a convenience store minutes before the police officer confronted him in the middle of the street and told him to get out the street. And then Michael Brown reached into the police officer's car while the police officer was sitting in the car, punched the police officer in the face, breaking his orbital bone, tried to get his gun, which the police officer was then able to shoot through the car door to get Michael Brown off of him, and then ordered him to get on the ground. And instead, Michael Brown charged him until he shot him enough times all of these things came, the truth came out eventually, but it was all lie after lie after lie. Everything that the media has put forth has been lies, over going all the way back to the Obama years. And Obama could do no wrong, but it was Obama. He didn't come in and fulfill Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision of to be judged by the content of our character, not by the color of our skin. He re-racialized the country as critical race theory says we must. Because critical race theory, as a legal theory, written in the late 1970s, was a reaction to this slippage, this perceived slippage from the gains made in the 1960s civil rights movement. And so there was a theory of legal jurisprudence that required equity to be done within the legal system to make sure that the gains made in the civil rights movement didn't slip back into pre-civil rights and back into old Jim Crow and segregation years before the civil rights movement. But it required a re-racialization where rather than put race off to the side as some third or fourth idea of importance, it was, we need to look at the legal system primarily, ipso facto, through the lens of race. And when Obama was on the campus of Harvard, when he was the president of the Harvard Review, when he was in law school at Harvard, he learned this theory from his mentor, the man who created that legal system. And Obama went on to be an attorney, who then went on to represent Acorn, who was a community organization. And he organized and extorted money from banks who wouldn't lend money to minority customers because they had lesser assets and credit scores, and he considered that to be discrimination, which ultimately led to passing of acts where the banks found ways of getting around, we'll just give you an interest-only loan. So what you have to pay is 15 years interest only, and at the end of 15 years it's a balloon note. So that way you can afford the monthly payment based on your debt to income ratio. Except what did we get 15 years later? We got billions of dollars of these bad mortgage loans, and we see in the 2007, 2008, we see this huge crash because all of these loans came due. So all of these things get put together. So understand, like, we constantly have to keep a historical remembrance of everything that's going on right now, not just the facts on the ground of what's happening at this moment. We cannot be prisoners of the moment, captives of the moment. We have to keep this in its long historical perspective. And how I would weave the Trump administration into that is, we all may like the fact that Trump was this outsider and Trump was, kind of like a wrecking ball, because that's the mindset of people like Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is somebody who wants to use Trump to tear the whole system apart, to to bring it down to the slab and then rebuild it like the founders intended. Well, that's dangerous. That's a dangerous mindset. So we have to remain sober-minded in our thinking. We have to remain thinking well about this and not think in this hard either-or fallacy, this hard duality of black or white. This requires a lot of nuanced thinking. Oftentimes you hear Rusty call in and we talk about this, and it requires us to not just be either or, good or bad, right or wrong. That sort of simplistic thinking makes for great radio, but it doesn't actually, doesn't go toward trying to fix any of the problems. So to me, that's the big story of the week. Go listen to the IRS whistleblowers, listen to what Shapley and Ziegler say, because they're the ones that actually went out and gave testimony this week before Congress in reference to what happened and why they became whistleblowers. And their reasons for blowing the whistle are far more dangerous and are far more concerning, and should be far more concerning for both you and I as Americans, regardless of what political persuasion you are. We should all be able to lock arms as American citizens against the weaponization of any of the federal bureaucracies, any intelligence agency, against law-abiding American citizens and or creating some type of multi-tiered system of justice. We say a pledge where we say, and liberty and justice for all. We want a system that works not just for the elite and everybody else, but that's what this IRS whistleblower case right now is showing, is that there is everything we have said with conjecture is being proven in real time. Another example is when you juxtapose what the Biden family is getting away with right now. And make no doubt about it, they are getting away with a sitting vice president. When Biden was Obama's vice president, he was being bribed by foreign entities. And he's not being investigated. And the reason that they can't investigate Hunter Biden is because when you investigate Hunter Biden, you have to ask questions, and those questions are going to lead to the reason that Hunter Biden, the crackhead, was being used not by his loving father, but by his exploiting father. The media wants everybody to think that Joe Biden is the father in The Prodigal Son. He is not. He is a father who knows that his son, Hunter, had a drug addiction and a problem, and he exploited it for his own personal financial gain. Joe Biden is a horrible father. And oh, by the way, and he still denies his 7th grandchild. Because Hunter got a stripper pregnant who had his child. And they won't recognize the child as either Hunter's child or as President Biden's 7th grandchild. But here's the other juxtaposition. Donald Trump this week revealed that he is the target of a grand jury investigation into January 6th. So forget about what happened up in New York with that indictment. That ain't going nowhere. Forget about the documents, because he didn't give documents back to the National Archives. This next indictment is the one that has the potential to knock President Trump out of the opportunity to run again for president. Because if they indict him for incitement of trying to overthrow the government, and they use the provision inside the 14th Amendment, he becomes disqualified from being able to run for office again. And so they're going to try and take the events of January 6th in this next indictment, and they're going to try to turn that into the reason that he can't run. Because the talking heads are going to tell you they want to run against Donald Trump. That is not true. They know that Donald Trump is the one guy that they don't want to run against, because he comes, just by being on the ballot, he comes with 40% of the vote. With no effort. He didn't have to do anything. 40% of the vote that gets cast is going to go for him regardless. And that's difficult when you have a feckless, weak, aging shell of a human being in Joe Biden, who can hardly muster up 30 to 35% of his base's vote. You have someone like RFK Jr., who's polling pretty good, almost at 20% within the Democrat Party. And you have people like Joe Manchin, who may consider a third-party run. And if you give the Democrats other multiple options, then what you end up getting is you get Trump may not be able to get 51% of the popular vote, but if he gets 43% of the popular vote, and Biden only gets, say, 40%, and some third party multiple third parties get the other 20, Trump wins. It's the same thing with Clinton. The way Clinton won both of his was because of Ross Perot. Ross Perot took votes away from George H.W. Bush. Ross Perot took votes away from the Republican challenger to Bill Clinton the following year. And right now, the third-party candidates are all on the Democrat side, which is not good. So when you have a strong runaway Republican candidate in Donald Trump, then you also have a situation where neither candidate has the capability of getting 51% of the popular vote, but we don't elect the president based off of the popular vote. We base it off of the Electoral College. And so then it becomes a much easier route for President Trump because he comes with a strong base of votes. And none of the other Republican candidates right now, not DeSantis, not Youngkin, not Vivek, none of these guys that you've never heard of, not Nikki Haley, not Tim Scott, who I really like, none of these guys have the ability right now to step up and catch President Trump in the elections, in the Republican primary right now. It's his to lose. So the Democrat Party right now is using lawfare. They are using lawfare to go after President Trump to try to get it to where legally he's excluded from being able to run for president again. And this prosecutor, Jack Smith, he is the hatchet man that the Democrat Party loves. He's one of the few prosecutors in the history of the United States that works for the Department of Justice who can say that he's had multiple cases that he has prosecuted that have unanimously been overturned by the Supreme Court. Do you know how hard it is to get all 9 justices to agree on anything? And yet Jack Smith's had multiple cases that the Supreme Court has said this is bad prosecutorial behavior. And 9 out of 9, 9-0, they overturned his prosecutions. That's who is going after President Trump at this point. How this man is not disbarred is beyond me. Now again, here's another example since we're talking about January 6th. Everyone that's been following the January 6th stuff from the beginning knows the name Ray Epps. Well, Ray Epps has been on video telling people, let's go storm the Capitol. Let's go in the Capitol. And people are like, no, Fed. Like, it's on video. And yet with all the people that were arrested, all the people who have been held in prison, all the people that have been charged, Ray Epps was never charged. And people said, well, he's clearly got to be some kind of counterintelligence. He's got to be working for the feds. He's got to be an insider working for the feds trying to get people to go in and break the law. And the fact that people like Tucker Carlson and Fox News pointed out Ray Epps, Revolver News and Darren Beatty have been all over the Ray Epps situation. Ray Epps files a defamation lawsuit against Fox News, but interestingly doesn't file a defamation lawsuit against former host Tucker Carlson, who was the main one pointing out that Ray Epps why isn't he being charged? Why isn't the federal government charging a guy who is clearly on video telling people to go in and break the law? Organizing it. And the guy that he's enlisted to be his attorney is a longtime Democrat operative who has a history of doing this kind of stuff to basically extort conservative and Republican and right-leaning organizations to basically settle out of court for a payday. And then after all this time, the feds finally come in and they finally charge Ray Epps. So this multi-tiered system of justice that we've been looking at is this week on full display, none better than the IRS whistleblower interview with Megyn Kelly, Gary Shapley, and Joseph Ziegler. Check it out this week. In other news this week, Gilgo Beach serial killer suspected arrested outside of his New York City office after a decade-long cold case investigation. There are some really striking videos of him being interviewed while working for a local municipality, and him talking about how he loves using the tool. His favorite tool is like a hammer. And it turns out that he's like, I think maybe up to a dozen prostitutes he basically choked and beat to death with a hammer. And so it's eerie to know what this man is charged with and what he's probably done. And talking to a lady who fits the description as she's a reporter, an interviewer, and she fits the description of all the women who they look like they were dark-haired, petite, kind of small, and she kind of looks like that, and he's like talking to her in this real friendly kind of way, knowing that while all that was going on, he's probably killed almost a dozen women at this point. It's very eerie to think about that. Trans Biden official says minors should receive gender-affirming care to avoid going through wrong puberty. Can you imagine how long ago would, if somebody would have publicly said that going through puberty is wrong? I mean, I feel like it wouldn't have been that long ago that this person would have been drummed out of public life. Like, this person would not have been able to continue to work in the government in any public capacity, least of all in a cabinet position for the President of the United States. But that's where we are now. Country Music Television drops Jason Aldean's Try That in a Small Town. Have you heard that song? Have you heard the country song?
Clip, not the whole thing. I heard a clip this morning.
Try That in a Small Town. Listen, it ain't about lynching. It ain't about race. If you look at the video, they use the video that you see from the Summer of Love, from the mostly peaceful protest, as entire city blocks are being burned to the ground. And he's basically saying that, like, you know what? That stuff might work in big cities because big city people don't look out for each other. But you try that, you want to protest, go protest. But you want to protest that somebody was killed wrong by the police, and then you want to go break into a Foot Locker and steal shoes, and that's part of your protest? Or you want to go to somebody's local corner grocery store and break in and take all of the candy out? Yeah. Try that in a small town where we got each other's backs. And most of us are all gun-toting, law-abiding American citizens. So you can take it as a threat if you're into breaking the law and calling it a protest. So I hope go woke, go broke. I hope CMT ends up going completely broke because they banned Jason Aldean's song. And there's nothing wrong with it. Meanwhile, nobody's trying to ban Cardi B's WAP.
Come on now.
Okay, like so Cardi B can run out there and talk about, you know, all of her juiciness and just be disgusting. You know, Megan Thee Stallion can be all body yaddy yaddy and talk about, you know, what's on her chest and her little big waist and her big fat gluteus maximus in all the wrong terms. All that stuff's fine. That'll never get banned because that's empowerment. Cardi B can talk about that little dangly thing in the back of her throat, you know. Yeah, you can talk about all that. But have a guy talk about how we're not letting people come in and protest and burn down and tear up and beat and steal people's stuff and hurt people and hurt their businesses and create economic deserts as a result of angry protests where you just basically want to steal a bunch of stuff. He's saying that ain't going to happen in a small town. You ain't going to get very far down the road. Try that in a small town. And he's right. He's right. Jumping in the chat room over at WSHO. Let's see, we got some folks active in there, so let me drop back to the beginning. Richard D, what's going on with small town? Okay, there you go, Richard. I just touched on it. Yes, thank you, Richard. Crossfire Hurricane was the name of the official investigation into President Trump's campaign and Russia collusion based off of the Steele dossier, and going to the, I think it's the FISA courts, and getting all of the necessary warrants to be able to tap and to surveil President Trump's transitional campaign. Michael N.M. says, try that in a small town song has the left so upset because it exposes the reality of the mega crime centers that once were called cities they created and now maintain. Of course, they don't live there, so they don't really care. Very true. Michael N.M. also said, sad that even Country Music Network is becoming like Bud Light now. Hopefully they will also learn a lesson. Listen, I'm telling you, man, we need to hurt each and every one of these major institutions that decide to buy into this woke garbage. I mean, look, we, in a lot of ways, we're blessed here in Louisiana that once Roe v. Wade was overturned in the Dodd case, immediately there was legislation on the books that was triggered to go into effect to more or less outright ban abortion in Louisiana. We are blessed to live in a state where babies will not be shop-vacced out of their mother's wombs. Now, that issue off the table, what's going to get you out to vote and mobilize? And I would say that listen, if you ask a Democrat candidate, should the genitalia and secondary sex organs of children be cut off of them for psychological reasons, if they can't say no, they should not be voted for. If you ask a candidate, define what a woman is, and they can't tell you an adult female human, just 3 words, adult female human. That is what a woman is, period. If they can't define it, or they won't define it, they don't deserve your vote. And in fact, they deserve to be voted out. Life has become very simple in terms of like who to vote for. Should we permanently dismember children? Yes or no? No. Good. You might get my vote. Secondary question. What's a woman? Well, you see, I mean, a woman is anyone who identifies... Bah! Wrong answer. It really should be that simple. YN, it's going to get much worse. No, not necessarily YN. Don't take a dispensational, eschatological view that things have to get worse before they get better. The Bible nowhere says that. But classical dispensational theology and its teachers do say that. If things have to get much worse before things get much better, YN, then Jesus' prophecy that the gates of hell will not be able to withstand the church has failed. And I don't think Jesus is a failed prophet. So just consider that before you think and try to interpret the Bible by current events. And that goes for anybody, by the way. Steve said, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, said he suspects foul play goes back to decades among President Joe Biden's family. Yeah, absolutely. Because we're forgetting all of Biden's siblings. All the contracts going all the way back to the Iraq War that were awarded to Biden's brother. Comer appeared on Senator Ted Cruz's podcast Verdict in a 2-part episode, the second half of which aired Friday. The Kentucky representative took questions surrounding his investigation into the Biden family's business deals abroad, including China, Russia, and Ukraine. Do you understand that part of Biden... Okay, so watch this. Think about this. And this is conjecture on my part. I'm connecting dots that may not be there. So I'm putting that out there as a disclaimer to what I'm about to say. But do you understand that if Biden knows that there is rampant corruption all throughout Ukraine, doesn't it behoove him to escalate the war in Ukraine so that Putin wants to continue to bomb and create all kind of havoc inside of Ukraine so that they can never actually bring forth evidence for the American people or for Republicans? Same thing with dropping out of Afghanistan. What that signal to Russia and China was like, hey, we're signaling to you guys, don't get involved in our domestic disputes because you guys have been paying our family. So we're doing this. Do what you need to do, but get rid of all the evidence in Ukraine by blowing up important stuff. Let's go to the phone lines, to the Table Cafe phone lines here on the Rock Worldwide Show here on WSHO, the Table Cafe, right there off of Highway 90 in Luling. Coffee, pastries, salads, daily specials, and it's a Christian-owned business. So support them when you're either passing through Luling, right before you get to Booty, the Table Cafe in Luling. Let's go to the phone lines now. Line 1, welcome to the Rock Worldwide Show.
Trey?
What's up, Rusty?
Yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure you heard me. Listen, I don't know if you touched on this, but I was listening to Mark Levine last night, and he said that they're going to put Donald Trump on trial in May, and that's during the election.
Yes, so that's the document case. So May 24, 2024, the South Florida judge that Trump appointed, and Trump was hoping to push that back, she went on ahead and ruled that the case will start in May of 2024. Now that document case, no one's really super concerned. I think that one ultimately, yes, he didn't give the documents back. He didn't, but that's not the one that would prevent him. He could actually be convicted of that one and still run for president.
Okay, well that's my thought. What Levine said, Mark Levine said, he said he's bound to get nabbed on one of the 37 counts against him. And it just seems to me, my thought here is that I know a lot of people are big Trump supporters. I would vote for Trump. I have no problem with voting for Trump. But I think they need to consider the possibility of him being tied up in court and not being a real formidable candidate. I personally think DeSantis, on the issues you've been talking about in this hour, would be a great candidate. And I just hope they don't close their mind to the fact that if it isn't Trump, it can't be somebody else, especially someone I think that's generally conservative, particularly on social issues, as DeSantis. So I guess I just feel like it's up in the air. It seems like more and more problems are happening for Trump, and that's their goal, to keep him from being a real
Yeah, listen, you and I have talked about this in great detail, but I think that's the reason that so many people have gotten into the race that otherwise seem like they don't have a chance to win, is because they're expecting the Democrats in their lawfare efforts to basically bring charges against him, and especially this next indictment that's about to come out. And if they can get him on incitement, then they can invoke the 14th Amendment, which basically said that anybody during the Civil War that incited a violent insurrection, basically that supported the Confederacy, they can't be in government anymore. So that's what they're going to try to get him on, that he basically incited the violence for January 6th, invoking the 14th Amendment, and then if he's found guilty of that, then he won't be able to be on the ballot. The good thing about that is if he's not on the ballot, then it makes people like DeSantis or Tim Scott, like, again, I'm a big fan of Tim Scott. I'm a big fan of Tim Scott because Trey Gowdy is a big fan of Tim Scott, and I really like Trey Gowdy. Now, so I think these candidates that otherwise just look like cabinet members in a Trump administration, this is Trump's nomination to lose, and the only way he loses the Republican nomination in 2024 is if they're able to convict him on grounds of violation of the 14th Amendment, which the Alvin Bragg case in New York won't. The case in the documents case in Florida, which is the May 2024 case, that won't prevent him from running. Even the possibility of this case in Georgia that may be brought, even that one doesn't look like it will meet the criteria of disqualifying him to run. This next indictment that comes out is the one that has the potential, if found guilty, to disqualify him from running for president or any office in the future.
And this one you're talking about is the one that they came up with yesterday or the day before? You mean the...
Yeah, they served him a letter Sunday night. They served him a letter letting him know that he was probably going to be indicted this week coming. And if they didn't come out this week, but it'll probably be next week. But you don't serve paperwork, an official letter from the Department of Justice on a Sunday night, unless you're under pressure, time sensitive. You got to get this thing rolling.
But there's one thought about this: if they keep Trump in court with all these different indictments and all that, it's going to make them look bad with people who might be on the fence. And I know that's not a lot of people who would vote for him if he's constantly looking like he's a criminal, getting ready to possibly be convicted. So I guess I just feel like, you have to look at it and say, can he win with all these things going on? Not that you can't support him as much as you possibly can, but that can he possibly win if he's always in court? And looking back to the public, because that's what the media wants to portray him as a criminal.
Yeah, I know for you and I that may have an effect, but so far every time he's gotten indicted or every time he's gotten arrested, he's gotten a bump in the polls and he's gotten a bump in fundraising. So, and remember, in the document indictment, he raised more money to the tune, I want to say, of like $4 to $7 million from first-time contributors to the Trump campaign. So these were people who didn't give in any of his first or second attempt at being elected. So I don't know. Rusty, I got a bunch more chats to get to, so let me run. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. 504-527-0800, 504-527-0800. Going back into the chat room at WSHO.com. Steve said Comer shares suspicion that Joe Biden sold access to our enemies for decades. That's probably true. YN says, gee, more ancient history. It's over. What are you going to do about it? No. YN, I'm laying out the case that this is not some new phenomenon. This is something that those of us going back to George W. Bush's auto bailout in the like 2006, 2007, whenever that was, that's when all of these things go back. We're coming up on 15, almost 20 years now of understanding that this stuff's been put in place. For many people who haven't been paying attention for this period of time, some of this stuff might all of a sudden seem new, but it's not. It's not new in any stretch of the imagination. And the architect of these issues that we're facing now are many of the ones who were in power when they started really rolling this stuff out in the early aughts. Because remember, it was Joe Biden who was Biden's vice president. Joseph says, why do you worship the civil rights movement? It was a federal government leftist movement to take away white folks' rights to be separated. Okay, Joseph, number one, I don't worship the civil rights movement. I do enjoy some of the rhetoric of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., separate from what became of the civil rights movement. Number two, there was a need for the civil rights movement because Jim Crow and black codes and segregation and anti-lynching laws, there was a real concerted effort on the part of white people to keep black citizens disenfranchised, basically going all the way back to the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments of the Constitution after the Civil War in the 1870s. So, and yes, I can agree with you that it was a leftist movement, which eventually got co-opted by a lot of communists. I don't deny those things. That's very open history. So don't mischaracterize my position, please, there, Joseph. Richard D. said, what can be done? Decent Christians are now a minority in a government pretty much run by criminals. Yes. So Richard D., good question. What can be done? We don't have a lot of time left. I got about 3 minutes. I don't have much time, but here's what can be done. Number one, if you're a Christian, remember where your citizenship lies. It does not lie primarily in the United States of America. It lies in the kingdom of God. We have no king but Jesus. So let's not conflate the two. America is not the new Israel. America is not the new people of God. There are decent Christians who are minorities in their governments and their countries all over the world. So in pretty much third world countries that are almost primarily run by criminals, decent Christians are there. We're not called as Christians to reform the government. We're called to live out the ethics of self-sacrificing, radically forgiving, enemy-embracing love as displayed and shown to us by Jesus Christ on the cross. And if I could go a step further, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches his followers that we shouldn't even resist the evil ones in our society. We should actually submit to the evil ones. I don't even want to go there and try to describe what that's going to be, but I'm going to tell you what it might be. It might be ejection from this system that we live in. In other words, it might be better for you and I as decent Christians to only vote in local political matters, to get back to what the founders intended, that government that governs closest to the people is the government that governs best. We were never intended to be this enraptured by the federal bureaucracy. It was separation of powers, local, state, and federal, and everything in the federal was representative. That's why it was called federalism. It's a representative government. We elect officials directly at the local and state level, and the state legislatures and the state governments were supposed to then appoint or send people to Washington, D.C. to represent the best interest of our state. It's the states that created the federal government, not the other way around. So if we want to do anything, we got to get fanatical about the government in our parishes, in our cities, our mayors, our city councils, our parish governments, our sheriff's offices, local government, school boards, local tax policies, your property taxes, your assessor's office. Those are the things that affect you on a day-to-day basis, and let the cycle, if you will, the 24-hour news cycle and the reality show that has become the federal government, let it play out, because it just doesn't have the ability to affect you and I on that regular of a basis. The so-called Christian hosts on this Christian station haven't figured out that the world is Satan's playground and that they're not staying here. Well, you know what, YN? We're also not getting out of here. So the world is created by God, and we've been put here to represent Jesus, and Satan is defeated. So what do you do with that? Joseph said, perhaps our foundation is wrong. George Washington hated it. Okay, yeah, of course the foundation's wrong, because people made it. We're not a Christian nation. Come on. You talking about going back and talking about history. What are we gonna do about that? Let's just lean into the ideas of the founders and enforce the law. How about that? Richard D. Not staying where? Yeah, exactly. Not staying in this world. Whee! We're gonna be raptured off. Whee! Be taken away. Whee! We're getting out of here. Whee! That's what people think Christianity is. Meanwhile, no, we're supposed to live here. Love God, love our neighbors. Who's my neighbor? The one who showed mercy. Now go and do likewise. All right, we don't have enough to get to all the chats in there. I'll hang out in the chat room but the next show, but we're already way over time. Remember to oppose progressivism wherever it rears its ugly head and illuminate the light of truth. We'll see you next time here on the Rock Worldwide Show.